Who decides? You, me, both of us? And these are the conversations that mythology opens up to you. I have focused, of course, on Indian mythology because when I said to my publisher that I want to write a book on Greek mythology, he said after 20 books. So I wrote 20 books on Hindu mythology and finally published my book on Greek mythology. But it was an Indian retelling of Greek myths because I was tired of seeing Western retellings of Indian myths. Let me give an example. Have you heard of a film called Avatar? So much money spent. If only they had consulted me for a fraction of the cost. I would have told them the design flaw. A superhero is an ordinary man who becomes extraordinary. It is based on Greek mythology. An avatar is a being who embodies infinity, who becomes finite. They're very different concepts. A superhero is a finite being who becomes extraordinary. An avatar is an infinite being who becomes finite. Very different. But we just assume meanings across cultures. We just assume it. And when we just assume it, we create a very scary world, which is homogeneous, where everybody is supposed to think and behave exactly the same way, because we are all equal. Of course, because the opposite of equality is inequality. But the opposite of equality is also diversity. And diversity, unfortunately, comes with inequality. Make your choice. What do you want? Those are the difficult questions that Indians would understand immediately, because the phrase for this is dharma sankat. How do you choose where there are no winners, or where everyone is a loser at some level? How do you choose? How do you choose? Because someone has to die. So in management, for example, one is taught management by objective. You should have an objective. The Indian model would be very different. It would be management by consequence. Because every action has a consequence. And every action is a consequence. That's the Indian model. I've heard so many people tell me that, oh, that's karma. And I said, please explain what karma means. And he says, as you sow, so you reap. I said, but that's a line from the Bible. It doesn't quite mean karma. And he says, no, but it's the same thing, right? I said, no, it is not. Because there are cultures in this world where you believe you live only once. And there are cultures in this world where you believe you live infinite lives. They are not the same. When you live only once, the value of your life is the sum total of your achievements. And therefore, this great anxiety to achieve. When you live infinite lives, the denominator of your life is infinity. So no matter what you achieve, it amounts to nothing. Then what's the point? What's the motivation? What's the drive? These are the questions that bothered the Buddha. And he said, what's the point? And therefore the concept of shunya, or zero, comes from this philosophy. And somebody says, well, if nothing matters, then everything can matter. So he came up with the concept of ananta, the name used for God in India. Ananta means limitless, infinity. So zero comes from Buddhism, infinity comes from Hinduism, and one comes from the rest of the world. We don't realize how stories influence our thoughts and feelings and ideas. The Mahabharata is an epic which was written conservatively 2,000 years ago. Written. It was perhaps told 1,000 years before that orally. But you asking very fundamental questions about an epic where the whole purpose of life is being discussed and all the various questions that are raised about violence, about sex, about paternity, about maternity, about fidelity, about gender, about identity, about property, about kingship, about kinship, all that is being raised. And the idea of cursing, and can you curse a god? And why does a god submit to a human's curse? Where have you heard this before? Where humans can curse a god, the avatar will be cursed, and the avatar will submit to that curse. Because karma is greater than God. How do you explain these ideas? For children, of course, you say, in the forest, might is right. In civilization, might should take care of the meek. That is civilization. Simple definition. In the jungle, the might dominate the weak. The strong will dominate the weak. But in a civilized society, the strong should take care of the weak. That sounds simple, but we all know how difficult it is, right? When you have to get into that crowded bus, you are not going to tell the weak person, please go in front. But that's civilized conduct. That's appropriate conduct.